All right. Hello, everyone. I'm J.S. Garrett, and this is From the Ashes interview series. I have returning guest Qayin with me this evening, who is the founder of From the Ashes Publishing. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, brother. Glad to be here again, and excited to hang out and discuss whatever magical topics might come up.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad to be on with you again, man. This is going to be fun doing this on a regular basis. We're going to get on here once a week to every 2 weeks and just have a chat, try to put out some good content and information, and of course talk about whatever we are currently working on. So hell yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now, one of the things I want to talk about tonight is possession, negative and positive possession, as well as spiritual parasites. It's something you and I both had a little bit of experience with dealing with. And it's pretty crazy. It's pretty tricky dealing with these types of things. And I really think that we only know about 10 to 20% of the knowledge out there of what's really going on. There's a lot of uncharted territory to be discovered, and each case throws me for a loop. I learn something new every time. So yeah, is that cool if we chat about that?
I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's just it. I mean, magic itself is uncharted territory. That's what we're doing here. You know, we're the pioneers going out here into the unexplored realms, pushing forth the boundaries of what is possible or not possible, and trying to find the truth of the matter and bring it to everybody so they can also utilize this in their practices. But that's definitely an interesting subject. Possession is something that I have undertaken personally a couple of times, with drastically different experiences, actually. And you know, I would say positive in my case, but yeah, there have been possessions that are definitely negative, that I've seen hurt quite a few people. So it just definitely seems to run the spectrum of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been taking on some high-risk, dangerous cases here lately, cases of violent negative possession and things of that nature. And possession is something I've experienced as well, both positive and negative. Undergoing possession with an entity can be the very best way to not only form a relationship with that spirit, but to learn directly from that spirit.
Exactly.
You get into a state where you cannot tell the difference between you and them. So you would obviously want to be very careful when choosing a spirit to undergo this with voluntarily.
Right.
There are spirits, and I don't really know what to call them or how to classify them. They don't seem to be demons. I mean, as we know through our work, demons are more ancient gods that are here to help us and teach us. These entities, I call them parasites. They seem to attach within people and feed off of them. They feed off different things. They manifest physical ailments in their area of attachment. And we cannot form relationships with these spirits. I mean, there's nothing good about them. And those can be very difficult to get rid of.
You know, I see them as rats. They're, like you said, they're not on the intelligence level of normal spirits where you can work with them or make any kind of bond or any kind of relationship with them. And I tell this to our clients when they're undertaking a ritual that, if they're new to the subject, that if you start doing magic, you start working magic, it's like a beacon that kind of goes out into the darkness, and it really attracts pretty much anything that's out there. Magic really piques the interest of entities, and they're drawn to it. So any entities that are around you, all of a sudden you light that torch in the darkness, and they're gonna start gathering around it, and it can draw all different kinds, but definitely draws the parasitic kinds as well. To me, they're not that big of a deal. It's just something that goes hand in hand with magic. As you saw, I just lit some sage. I do this on a very regular basis to kind of clear out any unwanted energies. And contrary to popular belief, it isn't something that gets rid of the spirits that I personally work with that are, left-hand path. It's not. It's silly. But it does clean the air. It does clean the space of energies that you don't want there, that are unwanted. I have found that working, especially with blood magic, that they really take a bigger interest in that kind of magic than, say, normal evocation. So I don't know if you found something similar, but it always seems to bring on some kind of a vampiric almost essence, of course, obviously, because of the energy that's being used. But
Yeah, blood magic and blood sacrifice definitely draws a lot of attention. So whenever I'm doing a rite like that, I go to great lengths to perform preliminary rituals before that in order to hold space and protection over my ritual circle. With the rite of deification, that's making an animal sacrifice. The preliminary rituals actually last longer than the actual deification rite, and that's to ensure my safety as well as the safety of the recipient. And the main reason is to make sure the ritual does not get hijacked by some random wandering spirit. If you don't have that sufficient protection over your ritual circle, which is summoning spirits to literally stand around the circle and make sure that the rite doesn't get hijacked. If you don't do that, then that's a big possibility that can happen.
Oh yeah.
Not necessarily going to be attacked or anything like that, but another spirit could easily slip in place of the recipient and steal the energy from that sacrifice. So things like that I think are important.
Yeah, definitely having that kind of protection around your ritual space. There's several different spirits that come to mind actually that are specific to that, where you can employ them to watch over your temple. Like this particular room has a guardian, so that if, like what you're talking about, any spirits or any kind of even magic that one might be throwing at me or something is not going to be able to get within this temple where I'm performing the magic. And you can do that for your house. You can do that for personal protection. There's even talismans or things like that. But it's like there's spirits and ways to protect yourself from these kinds of attacks and these creatures. But if you're not aware of it, yeah, I mean, they can definitely start to like build up, and it kind of causes a negative kind of feeling, and people can even be sick, energy drained, rites not working as well as they should, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. I had a lady several years ago. She was dealing with some poltergeist activity, someone I knew personally. So she asked me to come over and cleanse her house. And when I got there, I had the intention of performing an exorcism. I opened like a vacuum gateway using a bowl of salt water with a black candle in it to pull energy through it. And then I was going to burn sage and speak an exorcism throughout the house to just drive this energy out, or the spirit out, whatever she was dealing with. And so when I get there, the lady's acting very strange. Like she's having anxiety. It was almost like she didn't want me to come in the house, even though she invited me there. So it was obvious that she was under some type of influence. Mm-hmm. So I figured that the best thing to do here would be to exorcise her. So I opened this gateway in her living room. I had her sit in front of it and stare at the candle. And I stood behind her and put my hand on the back of her head and spoke this exorcism with a lot of power and authority. Now, while I'm doing this, she starts shaking a little bit. She twitches a little bit. Nothing crazy. No light bulbs exploded or anything like that. But afterwards, she told me that she had had a great deal of pain in her right thigh for over a decade. And it started overnight, and the muscles there would be very tense and achy and throbbing, and sometimes she would have sharp pains there. She said that while I was exercising her, that pain in her thigh got more intense, like it intensified and then it let go, like it totally released. And after that, she had no more pain there. So that's when I realized that this had to be a spiritual affliction that was causing that pain. And I attribute that to a parasitic entity, which is a energy form that has a consciousness that literally attaches and takes root within the body and causes a manifestation of a physical affliction. So, I mean, exorcism is a way that we can actually heal afflictions that are caused by spiritual entities by driving out the energy and driving out the spirit that is causing that affliction. And it then allows the body to heal itself.
Right. No, it's true. And when we think of possession, or spirit attachment, we generally think of that gets inside us, or in a totality kind of way. But there are specific spirits that actually, like you're talking about, attach to different parts of the body, and afflict that and kind of inhabit that kind of area as almost like a home. And I believe this would even kind of correspond to the Huron tradition of hot points, being places or point shards where beings or spirits will attach themselves to. So it's definitely things that afflict you on a physical level that can be spiritual in nature and not expect it to be that. You wouldn't expect your leg, because it's been hurting for several years or whatnot, to be the cause of a spirit, but that can definitely be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that every medical affliction is spiritually related, but I do think that a lot of them are.
Right.
And something else I've found through working with people suffering from these types of things is these parasites can actually create like an astral copy of itself that can in turn inflict you. I've actually contracted a parasite through working with someone who is dealing with this affliction, and it's almost like what's that old movie with the little parasites that attach to the back of the person's neck, and then they duplicate themselves in order to puppet masters. You know what I'm talking about. But I think it's kind of like that. It's like it creates an astral copy of itself that can in turn inflict more people, and those can be very nasty. I mean, it's not nasty at first, but if you let it go unchecked, then the more it's like a leech. The more it feeds off of you, the bigger and stronger it gets, and it can become a real problem.
Right. I think the key really is just keep energy flowing. Really, it's kind of a feng shui kind of thing, but it's like how you set your temple up, how you keep the energies going, how you interact with it. It's all about movement and not letting things stagnate. Keep things going, keep things clean, keep a good energy with the spirits that you work with constantly around you. Keep your protectors active, and just have a good relationship with them. And it's like a lot of these problems that manifest will immediately just by default not be there, and that's kind of I also believe it has to do with like kind of a state of mind as well of keeping that kind of state of mind of movement forward and keeping things clean. So it's interesting when you say you're evoking like these kings, these beings, these master spirits, but you've got dirty laundry all over the place or something, and it's like you have to like understand that it's good to have a clean environment. It's good, energetically, respectfully for these entities to be and manifest in. It's definitely something of respect, and I believe we get a lot of better results spiritually and magically from it. But again, it's really just about keeping that energy flowing and having good protectors in place. Like I said, I've got one here for my particular temple that is very strong. It's very what I consider strong silent type. Kind of stands in the background with a flaming sword. Doesn't say a whole lot, but I know he's there.
Yes, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very beneficial entity. I do think that evocation is a good way to combat these things. Like, I have come into situations where an exorcism did not work. It was ineffective.
Right.
It was a lady that I used to work with. She didn't really know much about what I did, but she knew that I was into some type of occult practice. So she comes to me. She's very stressed out. She tells me that her husband and her children are suffering from poltergeist activity as well as very strange behavior, a lot of anxiety, and it turns out that her husband was actually possessed, and he contracted this like a virus from a coworker. It was a guy that he rode in a truck with, and his coworker was having some very terrible symptoms. This entity was literally possessing him and trying to force him to commit suicide in his sleep. While he was awake, he was having anxiety, panic attacks, and then he was waking up in the middle of the night with a cocked pistol in his mouth, getting ready to squeeze the trigger while he's asleep, like sleepwalking, almost blowing his brains out. And so he confides in his in my friend's husband that he rode in the truck with, tells him about what's going on. And so he had the idea that they should pray together. Okay. So they pray together, and all of a sudden this guy starts feeling better. But then the other guy starts having the same symptoms that his friend was having. So
right.
It's like it jumped to him like a virus, like fresh meat,
right.
Parasite.
Right.
And then he started having the anxiety, the panic attacks, the delusions, hallucinations, and he was waking up, digging through his gun safe in the middle of the night, really scary shit.
Right.
So, yeah, they didn't know what to do, so they reached out to me. And so I agreed to come over to the house and do an exorcism. And I insisted the entire family needed to be there so that this thing wouldn't have the opportunity to jump ship and piggyback out on someone else.
Sure.
And so I get over to the house, and as soon as I set foot on the property, this guy is sitting in the carport. He's a big 350-pound grizzly bear. Pretty scary dude, especially if you're possessed with superhuman strength. The Catholics have 8 armed men or big armed men present just to exercise a 16-year-old girl, because people are very strong when they're
right.
influences. So I took a friend with me, and I insisted that his 2 very large sons be there, because if this guy went off, there would be no way I would be able to subdue someone that size on my own.
Right.
Not if they were propelled by some type of superhuman strength. So as soon as I get there, I start feeling something hitting my aura. Like it wasn't penetrating me, but it was like a little invisible spears or arrows were being launched at me, And he's sitting in the carport just looking at me. His eyes are all bloodshot and shit, and he's squirming around and acting all kinds of weird. And I'm like, okay, this is fucking serious. So everybody go inside. I'll be in there in a minute. So I do some preliminary rituals before I step into the house, call on some protection to help me with this. And so I go in, and I have the whole family sit in the living room, and I go from one to the other. And what I'm doing is looking for this thing. Like I'm pretty sure that this guy is the only one possessed, but I want to make sure. So I put my hand on each of their heads and spoke an exorcism. Nothing. They sat there. They were totally fine, totally cool, totally calm. I get to him, and I start speaking the exorcism, and he starts thrashing around, screaming, crying, acting like something is ripping him to shreds from the inside out. And so I get like real forceful with this exorcism and speak it over and over. And the more I did it, the worse he got. Like it was tearing him apart. And so at this point, I'm like, oh, fuck. The exorcism's not working. This has never happened before. I'd already used and exorcised the entire house. I'd opened the gateway. I did the lesser banishing ritual. I did all this shit, and it was not effective. Whatever this thing was extremely powerful. So in that little brief moment of, oh, shit, this guy, it looks like he's dying here, and I'm all out of ideas now. So it was at that moment, Necronomicon spirit that I'd worked with as a Reludu. His sigil kind of flashed in my mind, and I remembered his description that he provided the most perfect safety and protection. He was very powerful.
Right.
So I just kind of went with it. It was all dramatic. I knock all the shit off their coffee table, draw a sigil really fast, poured some alcohol in a basin and lit it on fire. I didn't have any white candles or anything. And so I blood the sigil, and I speak the summoning prayers that are given in that book in order to summon this entity. Right. And the whole time I'm doing the evocation, this guy's thrashing around on the couch, screaming and crying like a little kid. Like it was bad. And so I evoke the spirit. I feel his presence come into the room, and even though I could feel it, he still didn't stop yet. And so I just simply spoke to the spirit. This is what we're dealing with. We really need help right now. I'm offering my blood on this man's behalf. Anything you can do to help. Thank you very much. So I burn the sigil, and as soon as I burn the sigil, this is something we all felt. It was a sensation. It was like an invisible sword sliced through the air, and we felt it like go through all of us. And as soon as that happened, he immediately stops thrashing, stops crying, and he's totally still. And that was the end of it, dude. I mean, that he laid there for about 10 minutes, and he got up and collected himself. Gesundheit. But yeah, he's been totally fine ever since. Like, the whole atmosphere in the house changed. Whatever this spirit was that was possessing him was gone. And that was a holy shit moment. You know, that was shocking.
Yeah.
The whole experience was shocking, but that was very effective. So I mean, whenever your normal tools fail you, you know, exorcism, sage, stuff like that, the best defense against the tank is another tank, a bigger, fatter spirit to tackle whatever the haunting spirit is. So anyway.
The next spirits are very controversial. I've gotten immediate results and sometimes nothing. It just really depends. You feel a presence and sometimes you don't. But with that particular entity, I've worked with that spirit quite a bit with great result. And you know, there's also a power word that goes along with it, which is ban mask him. That also helps banish particular entities. But
yes, I did chant that word while I was evoking him. It's very effective.
Right. Powerful stuff for sure. It's not only negative effects though that are received from possession. You know, like you were saying earlier, that there's definitely a positive aspect to this particular undertaking. And it's something that's voluntary. It's something that we openly invite within ourselves for this gnosis, for this kind of communion with these beings. And you know, I have to say that I'm not the biggest fan of possession. I don't like the idea of giving up my own personal control or will. But I do also find that is sometimes the best way to completely integrate with an entity, and as you say, to not know the difference between yourself and it, to completely be as one. And it's as if an osmosis kind of occurs where their knowledge now is your knowledge. You leave with that experience with an innate knowledge of that being, and it's just like it seems to open up so many different doors. Your understanding of if you're working with a system of magic or a current of energy or a history of magic in it, or you know, a specific tradition, all of these things kind of click. You know, and it seems like you just have more of a deeper knowledge of how to work with these entities. And get the best results for sure. But again, you know, it is kind of one of those things that I'm not, you know, I've undergone possession before with some pretty strong entities on you know, All Hallows Eve several years ago. And when I had done this, I continually chanted over and over again. I'm not even going to say what I was working with, but I lost complete consciousness. The next thing I know, I woke up and it was 2 hours later, and I don't know what happened. So, you know, there's very interesting things that can occur when you're working with these kinds of energies. But I mean, what I left with though was definitely, you know, an innate knowledge of those particular entities and it was different than I thought it would be, which, you know, it goes to show that you do get true knowledge from this kind of interaction that you wouldn't normally expect. You definitely get a deeper knowledge of them and what they're associated with or how to work with them.
Yeah, I think it's extremely beneficial, especially to, you know, the practicing magician. That really is, like you said, the best way to fully immerse yourself into a system, mesh your energy with the energy of the spirit that you're working with and learning from. And when you're in that state of perfect possession, like you can have dialogue with these entities inside your head. It's like telepathic communication. And that's how I've come up with my best ideas, my best workings, my best rituals. They've all been from communing like that with these entities. I mean, I get a lot of great information out of certain books, but you know, we're on our path working. You know, I think magicians, like, what we're working towards is getting to a point where we can create our own rituals and get results.
Yeah.
To the point where we don't have to do a ritual. We can simply command something into existence or influence a situation by projecting our will. And
that is, to me, the ultimate goal, you know, to surpass physical tools, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you don't always have time to throw out a circle and go through the motions, you know.
Right. Well, you know, it's so that, you know, all of these things are just, you know, props that really the magic occurs within yourself. And that's true to a certain extent, for sure.
To a certain extent. I think some things are necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we're talking about opening up these channels to these beings, I don't think that a lot of people realize, but when you're writing books about these entities, you know, Smokeless Fire, working with Jan Reblis, you know, the Black Book of Azathoth with the old ones, and Thumio with you know, the different fallen angels, and these different intelligences. These beings are present. They are around you. You know, you're working with these spirits and these spirit animals. These spirit animals are around you. The knowledge that you're writing down is transmitted from them. And, you know, like, as an example, you know, like the Book of Smokeless Fire was written within a magic circle. You know, all of these sigils and these triangles of art and circles of magic. You know, these things came to me in vision, you know, from these beings being around, supplying me with this information, using me as a conduit to get this into physical written word, to get these sigils down. And this is the kind of stuff that you're going to get from actually undergoing a possession, is getting these impressions, getting these visions, getting this kind of information that you wouldn't normally access just by working with them or doing normal evocation.
Yeah.
So there's tremendous value in actually, you know, opening up yourself to such energies. It's just, you have to, again, be careful of the kind of safeguards that you put in place.
Yeah.
You want to make sure they're active, for sure.
Well, I found, you know, since you were touching on the animal spirit thing, I mean, that's a big part of my practice, is getting information from these primal entities, you know, from these animal spirits. And they don't really, you know, communicate with us in English, you know. It's whenever they transmit something to you, it comes as a thought form driven by an instinct, by an urge to do something, like a mental picture and the urge to do something ritual-wise. And so it can get very confusing. And something that I've been doing in order to help this process is undergoing possession with these animal spirits, like literally calling that spirit into myself. And it's something you will definitely feel it when it comes into you, and it does some strange things. But I have found that these are some of the safest spirits to undergo possession with, and it's because they predate humanity, so they were not created by man. And therefore, they're not corrupted by man. Okay, right. If you undergo possession with a spirit from a pantheon that was created by some fucking bloodthirsty psycho culture, then chances are you're going to have some negative side effects. You know, depending on the zeitgeist of the culture that hatched that entity, as some people would put it. But I've also noticed that you'll take on aspects of that creature. You know, not only the primal urges and the energies, but I've had physical things happen too. I was working with the spirit of the turkey vulture, which it actually gave me its name and a sigil from which to call on the spirit. But whenever I invoked the spirit, called it into me, I had this lump come up right where my third eye would be, just this little lump. Right. It wasn't painful. It wasn't red. It wasn't a blemish. It was just like a tiny little marble-sized lump that came up. And I had all this gnosis came through. I did get a headache, and was, feeling pretty strange for a few days. And then it went away, shortly thereafter. And I kept wondering, like, did that lump come up, because did the spirit do that to me? Because it was, I walked outside, invoked the spirit, I walked back inside, that lump is there. I'm like, okay. So like 2 months later, I do the same thing. I invoke that same spirit, undergo possession of that same entity, and the lump came up again. So, I mean, right. I don't know how to explain that, what that means, or anything, but it's very significant. It's very profound.
Well, we're crossing onto several different subjects here. One, we're talking about taking on the spirit and having, physical changes occur because of it. And this happens, when people have, multiple personalities. There's often a personality that has cancer, and the other personality does not. When they do transfer personalities, the physical ailment will disappear, and that's something that is completely inexplainable to science. So you're talking about actually, it's very similar. You're talking about having the spirit of this entity come into you, and you're actually taking on some kind of a physical appearance, working with this entity. But you're also scarily, you're on the line here, not necessarily scarily, but you're really touching on the line of lycanthropy. We're talking about werewolves here, and actually taking on these kinds of like entities, and having them join with you to become something else. And we're talking about shape-shifting to some degree. So this is kind of an interesting subject for sure to kind of get into in that regard.
Yeah, I've never personally encountered a werewolf or anything like that, but I have talked to some very intelligent, educated, what I would consider to be credible people that have had these encounters. And right. Sitting there listening to them talk, Robert Bruce is one of them. Had an encounter with a creature that he believed to be a werewolf, and right. Listening to that guy talk, I don't think he's lying. I don't doubt one word of what he's telling me, and that's pretty fucking crazy to think that someone could do a ritual to literally transform into some type of creature. I mean, there's counts of it all through history, though.
All through history, yeah, all different kinds of cultures. It's something that seems to be a common thread of joining with these particular. It's not just wolves, though. Most people it's categorized as werewolves, but that they actually transform into birds, bears, other things like this. A lot of Native American stories. There's a tribe that was at the base of Mount Shasta that believed that they came from the bear people, and they joined with them, and also they could become bears. And so there's definitely that kind of heritage that goes back, as well as in Africa, there's all kinds of different stories of shapeshifters of people becoming leopards or cheetahs but yes, also wolves, but all different kinds of animals. We're of course stuck with the traditional werewolf is what we kind of view, but it's all forms. But that's again what you experience with the lump. You're taking on these attributes, these spiritual attributes of these different creatures, and it's manifesting within ourselves like a separate personality would. So yeah. Very powerful, and be careful which different kinds of creatures you invite within yourself.
Yeah. I have had some experiences with working with these animal spirits. One was the spider. That one almost killed me. I was bedridden for over a week. I actually talked to you about that previously. That was fucking crazy, man. Like it's going in my book. I'm not gonna, I could sit here for 2 hours and talk about that experience, but you do have to be careful. These are extremely powerful entities, and
right.
Yeah, you have to be very careful. But ultimately, it worked out. It was just a very intense path working that took its toll. But I would do it again if I had to go back, and it was definitely worth it.
Sure.
So. When you talk about shape-shifting into another creature entirely, that's something that sounds impossible, okay? From sitting here in this physical reality, imagining a person totally morphing into a different creature. But whenever you read the holographic universe and you study that science and that theory and see how it is being proven by science that we are indeed a hologram, that we are holographic, we are not physical solid beings, we are energy that is holographic, like a projection. So if you consider that, then it would be very possible to override this program somehow in order to transform your physical appearance, because we're essentially sitting in a fucking video game. Okay. Right. So the program is being projected from somewhere. We don't know where. Right. But I really think that's what we're doing when we practice magic. Magic spells are like cheat codes for reality, you know, that alter reality. You know, yes. In a video game, you have a cheat code that allows you to bypass to this level or you know, manifest this automatically in the game. I really think that that is very possible from a scientific standpoint. If you knew how to do it, you could.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what magic is. You know, that's a whole other subject. But yeah, that's essentially is what you're doing is gathering up personal information through yourself and through working with spirits to push out from your personal reality into the conceptual reality to actually, you know, show a change that's measurable by not just yourself but others as well. To actually genuinely change reality that's measurable to other people, not just yourself.
Yeah, and you know, I haven't met anyone personally that has done the rites of lycanthropy, but I have talked to people that have had encounters with these people who have done these rituals, and I mean the general consensus is from very credible people that this does in fact happen, and yes. Still happens all over the world. And there's a book you told me about called Werewolves by Elliot O'Donnell, where it has a ritual in that book, a very specific, complete ritual that you can go out into the woods and perform to supposedly turn into one of these werewolves, one of these shapeshifters.
It's very in depth, and it does definitely talk that, you know, contribute the power of this is rather interesting. It's very ceremonial, very ceremonial magic, but it does talk about it being black magic specifically, and the entity that it talks about bringing forth is something that they say is quite terrifying. I have not undergone this ceremony myself, but it does sound rather intense, I have to say.
Yeah, so, yeah.
You know, there's means out there. There's means out there.
Yeah, you know that excited feeling you get in your stomach whenever you come across something really, really interesting. Yeah. Like when I read that ritual, it was like the butterflies were buzzing in my stomach. Like just the idea of hiking 5 miles out into the wilderness by myself with no cell phone in the middle of nowhere, setting up and performing this ritual and waiting for this thing to come and manifest and devour you. Like, yeah, that, I mean, yeah, I think it would make most people shit themselves.
Yeah, it definitely takes a deal of commitment to want to do this for sure. Definitely a unique state of mind, I would say.
Yeah, I would want to track down someone who had actually done this first to find out a little bit more about what you're turning into. You know, like maybe I should try to get Elliot O'Donnell on a podcast. I don't know if he's still around or not, but
yeah, difficult. Might need some necromancy with that one, but you know.
I think it's an older book, so yeah. But yeah, that would be interesting. So yeah, if there is anyone out there who watches this who has undergone the rites of lycanthropy and can in fact turn into a werewolf and talk about it, then by all means hit me or Espen Qayin up, and we will have you on for a fucking podcast because I want to hear firsthand accounts from someone here.
Absolutely.
All right, brother, we're approaching that 45-minute marker. I want to not keep these things too long. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
You know, we could go on and on for hours, my brother, but I think this is good for now. I think we'll hit it again next week.
Sounds good, brother. Well, you have a good night, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and stay tuned because we are just getting started here at From the Ashes, and we're going to be bringing forth a lot of cool shit in the very near future. Have a good night, brother.